This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. On today's program, we welcome back Dr. Joanne Conaway for an in-depth look at why America is so sick. In her book by the same title, she links digestive health to immunity issues. Now, Hippocrates knew about this over 2,000 years ago when he said, "Death begins in the colon." Well, I have a gut feeling that today's roadshow is one that can and hopefully will make us pay closer attention to what we put in our mouths. At this time, let's welcome back Dr. Joanne Conaway. Good to have you back with us, Dr. Conaway.
Well, thank you so much, David. It's great to be here.
Well, a quote we have heard you say many times here on Oasis is that 75 to 80% of our immunity is found in the gut. Tell us what that means.
Well, what it means is that literally if your immune system is not functioning at an optimal level, it's because your digestive system is not healthy. Literally, when we talk about the immune system and the function of the immune system, what we know is that what drives our immunity is a healthy digestive system. So if your digestive system isn't healthy because of either the foods that you've eaten or perhaps medications you've taken, things that have disrupted the balance of bacteria in your gastrointestinal system, your body is constantly fighting to keep your gastrointestinal system healthy, and there's really no reserve to keep the rest of you healthy from the immune perspective. So people who have an unhealthy digestive system ultimately are those people who, unfortunately, are sick all the time. Those are the people who constantly have any cold that comes to the office or any GI bug that comes through the office. These are people who may seem on the outside to be perfectly healthy, but because of those little things, we know that they're not healthy. And those little things can come in an array of symptoms. Many people who have gut issues, for example, have skin issues. And what's happening is people are not aware of the fact that what's going on in the inside so dramatically dictates what happens on the outside. And oftentimes people will say to me, what does my skin have to do with my gut? And what we know is it has everything in the world to do with your gut. Conditions like eczema or psoriasis, things like that, can have a inception in the gut, in an unhealthy digestive system, if you will. And the sad reality is, so oftentimes people don't realize that it's what they're eating or not eating, it's the foods that are in our food supply, it's the impact of perhaps antibiotics or steroids, sometimes over-the-counter medications that people take. All of these things drive a healthy gut balance. And by gut balance, I mean the balance of the good, healthy gut bacteria with the less desirable or unhealthy gut bacteria or even fungal yeast that is in the digestive system.
Okay, so to recap and simplify what you just said, if we have a healthy gut, our immune system will work properly and stave off a host of illnesses. If we have an unhealthy gut, then our immune system is compromised and we are open to a host of illnesses. Do I have that correctly?
That's right on. That's
okay.
Absolutely.
Well, so then the goal is to get a healthy gut. Now, you mentioned some of the things that cause an unhealthy gut. You mentioned antibiotics, and give me the rest of that list, please.
Well, there are several things, certainly antibiotics and steroids.
Now, when you say steroids, we're not talking about like a football player taking steroids or a weightlifter.
No.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking more about the steroids that would be prescribed for certain conditions, like many people are prescribed prednisone to help with an inflammatory reaction of some diagnosis they may have. So prednisone is unfortunately used quite readily in the medical profession, and although it does a really good job of helping with symptoms, it also dramatically impacts not only the bacterial balance, it also dramatically impacts the function of the adrenal glands. So I personally think that steroids are prescribed far too often, far too frequently, and people suffer as a result. But the other things that impact gut bacterial balance in a big way are more common medications like the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications that are so popular on the market today, the ibuprofen, those things that people don't think a minute about. I have a headache, or I have a toothache, or I sprained my ankle. I'm just going to take ibuprofen. And the problem is those drugs have their own long list of side effects, not the least of which is an impact on good, healthy gut bacterial balance. And then we have to talk about the foods that we eat. And when we talk about the food that is in our food supply, it's dramatically different from what it was 50, 100 years ago. When we talk about food now, unfortunately for us, people who eat food today are generally eating what comprises the standard American diet. The standard American diet, or the SAD diet as we call it, is comprised of foods that are genetically engineered, genetically modified. So much of it is foods that are not food. They're actually foods that are primarily filler. For example, if you go into a restaurant and you order a chicken sandwich, for example, and it's one of your fast food restaurant chains, and I don't want to name any of them in particular, but you go into a fast food restaurant chain and you order a chicken sandwich, there's a strong likelihood that you're not going to get just chicken and a little bit of lettuce and maybe a little bit of tomato, but you're going to get a compilation of 50 or 60 different fillers in that food, fillers in that chicken. And that's not something that you think about. That's not something that you recognize. And certainly the same thing happens with ground beef and other foods that are prepared for the masses, if you will. Now, what happens is that product comes to you, looks good, tastes like what it's supposed to be, but in fact, so much of it is filler. And where does that filler come from? Oftentimes, the filler comes from genetically engineered corn, genetically engineered soy, and when we talk about genetic engineering, we're led to believe that genetic engineering is beneficial. Genetic engineering will help to feed the masses. Well, crops are genetically engineered for primarily two reasons. One, to create their own pesticide, and number two, to be able to withstand being sprayed with Roundup. Mm-hmm. Now, in Roundup, the active ingredient is glyphosate. Glyphosate enters a weed, and through a biochemical pathway called the shikimate pathway, that weed dies. Well, genetically modified foods are genetically modified so they can be sprayed with that same glyphosate and not die. The unfortunate thing is, every minute that crop is growing in the field, we unfortunately are sucking up the glyphosate into that crop. So now when we eat the crop, we are eating glyphosate. Mm-hmm. Remember, glyphosate's the active ingredient in Roundup. It's what kills the weed. Now, chemical companies have always contended that it's not dangerous to the human body because the human gene does not have that shikimate pathway. The human gene does not have the pathway whereby that Roundup or glyphosate will kill the weed. And that, in fact, is true. But what we also know is every one of our gut bacteria does have that pathway. And if we talk about a healthy digestive system and we talk about the need for that balance of good, healthy gut bacteria versus the bad bacteria, if all our bacteria have that pathway and we're disrupting that pathway, then what is that going to do to our gastrointestinal system health?
Good question. So whether it's medication or improper foods that we eat, both of these items are causing unhealthy guts. And just so our listeners really wake up and pay attention to this message, Dr. Conaway, what are some symptoms that they may be having that are a result of having unhealthy guts?
Well, unfortunately, people have all kinds of issues. They may have constipation. They may have diarrhea. They may have issues with bloating, gas, cramping after they eat a meal. And the unfortunate thing is, for many people, as they get older, they just seem to want to accept that this is the way things are. And that's certainly not the way things should be. When we talk about gas, bloating, cramps, diarrhea, constipation, any of those things that impact the good feeling about your gastrointestinal system, those things are not normal, and those things should not be occurring. I deal with people all the time who say to me, I only have about 2 or 3 healthy bowel movements in a week. Well, 2 to 3 healthy bowel movements in a week is not healthy. You should really have 2 to 3 healthy bowel movements in a day. What happens is if you're not getting rid of the putrefied toxic waste that's in your colon in a timely fashion, that putrefied toxic waste is going to recirculate into the system and cause issues and problems with chronic disease. Mm-hmm. It's because all those toxins are coming right back into the system and have to be dealt with, again, by your detox pathways, your liver, your kidneys. And so it becomes this vicious cycle.
And one of the telltale signs, as you pointed out, are skin disorders.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Conaway, before we take our break, what percentage of Americans would you say have a healthy gut?
Well, in the research I've done and in the patients and people I've taken care of, I would have to say that that percentage is significantly lower than we'd like to see it. Most people have an unhealthy digestive system because most people eat the standard American diet or SAD diet. As far as an actual percentage of the population that I would say has a healthy gastrointestinal system, mm-hmm. those numbers are going to be pretty low, David. You kind of caught me off guard with that one because I wouldn't even want to speculate, but I would guess probably somewhere around 20% of people have healthy gastrointestinal systems. The rest of people don't.
Well, we want to change that, don't we, Dr. Conaway?
Yes, we do.
All right, Dr. Joanne Conaway is my guest for the hour. I'm David Warren, your host. And listeners, it's time to go to your phones and call family and friends who need to hear the information that she is sharing today. When we come back, I'm going to ask Dr. Conaway why she chose to leave her job as a registered nurse in order to proclaim this message of digestive health. We'll both be back after this. I'm David Warren here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world. On today's program, Dr. Joanne Conaway is with us, and I want to go ahead and give her website in case you have to run into work or into the store or wherever, but I bet you're just glued to your radios right now because this information is so interesting and so needed for you and for me, the listenership of the Oasis Network. Her web address is drjconaway.com. That's the letters D-R-J, Conaway, C-O-N-A-W-A-Y.com. And on the front of this book, she's written, Why is America So Sick? We see that she has a pedigree, BSN, RN, indeed. What is BSN, Dr. Conaway?
BSN is Bachelor of Science degree in nursing.
How about RN?
Registered nurse.
How about ND?
Naturopathic doctor.
Okay, so there's a story in there somewhere. How do you go from an RN to an ND? You've got a story to tell.
Well, it's interesting, David, and, for me, it's always you're in the right place at the right time. Divine intervention. I just know that my career was the career path that I should have been on, and I was very happy to do what I did as a nurse. I absolutely love nursing. But one of the things I got to do as a nurse was I worked for several years as a nutritional support nurse. And as a nutritional support nurse, I took care of people who could no longer eat by mouth. And this was back in the late 1970s, early 80s, when we first realized we could keep people alive by giving them the nutrition that they needed through the intravenous route. Mm-hmm. So we knew they needed carbohydrates and proteins. We quickly learned that the human body has a basic need for essential fatty acids, which we were not truly aware of. We had to come up with a formulation that could be safely given intravenously. But more specifically to overall nutrition and to the message of minerals and vitamins, we also learned that the body has a basic need for many minerals and trace minerals that we were not aware of. Those minerals and trace minerals, we learned about them in chemistry class, They were on the periodic table in the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
but we were not so familiar with the human body having that basic need. So as I understood that message and as I later learned about formulations that we could actually take in terms of supplementation that provided minerals and vitamins, I started to focus more in that arena, the all-natural arena. And this was also at about the time in my career when we were finding that more and more pharmaceuticals were being driven into the repertoire, and yet they were not causing any real results, in my opinion. They were not improving things, and especially in the field of cardiac. I was a cardiac nurse for a long time, and I can remember I had taken off a couple of years of nursing, and at the time I left, the nurse's drug handbook was maybe a half an inch thick, and by the time I came back after being gone for a few years, it was almost 2 inches thick.
Wow.
And the majority of those pharmaceuticals were catered to conditions that were cardiovascular disease conditions. Now, heart disease is still a leading cause of death in this country, and so the money is to be made in pharmaceuticals that treat heart disease. So it was a real epiphany for me because as a nurse, if you're going to give a pharmaceutical, you have to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go to the nurse's drug handbook, you have to learn proper dosage, you have to learn interaction, you have to learn how the medication works, any potential side effects, all of those things, so that when giving a patient a medication, if they have any untoward effects, you can identify it or you
Right.
can help to identify what the problem is. I would go to that nurse's drug handbook religiously because I had been away for a while and all of these pharmaceuticals were new to me, and so many of them, under mechanism of action, it would say unknown. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm giving a medication to a person and we don't even know how it works. We don't even know what it does. And so as I started to work more and more with people and encourage them to clean up their diet and encourage them to take good mineral and vitamin supplementation, I started to find that the people who were doing that were seeing better results. The people who were doing that were actually getting healthier, taking good nutritionals. And so I started to do some research, and of course what I found was that food has been medicine forever.
Mm-hmm.
When our Maker made us, He put us on this earth and provided for us the things that we need to stay healthy. And it's not pharmaceuticals, and it's not genetically modified food. So as time went on, I became more and more enthralled with the message of natural health versus conventional medicine, as I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I retired from nursing early, went back to school, and now I focus on an all-natural approach to health and wellness.
And your focus really is on digestive health, and it's because of your son. Tell us that story.
You know, it's interesting because when my son was born, I had the opportunity to have this wonderful bundle of joy. He was a late baby. I did not get pregnant and have him until late in life. And for the most part, he was a real healthy kid. I was very pleased, very effortless pregnancy, except I had gastroesophageal reflux disease, a little bit of carpal tunnel, but beyond that, I was pregnant. I was thrilled to be pregnant. Those things just didn't bother me. So I have this bundle of joy, and he's a really healthy kid. And at about age 2, he got a horrible strep throat and ear infection. And it took 3 different rounds of antibiotics to kill the infection. And during the 3rd course of antibiotics, he became very dehydrated, and it was because of a horrendous diarrhea. The child was just having terrible diarrhea, couldn't keep anything in his system. It would go into his system and come right through his system. I knew that what was happening was all those antibiotics we were giving him, they were killing off the good, healthy gut bacteria. And so he no longer had what we call the flora in his gut, the healthy bacteria like the lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium. It had all been driven out by the antibiotics. The antibiotics had killed it all off. So I was smart enough at the time to realize this was what was happening, and I went to the pharmacy and I got Lactobacillus acidophilus. And I started to give him the lactobacillus. Within 24 hours, the diarrhea cleared up. But subsequent to that, he developed a horrible eczema. And I'm not talking about a mild case of eczema. This was down his back, across his bum, behind his knees, in the bends of his arms, under his armpits, in his scalp. Horrible eczema. And he lived with that eczema for 8 years. And the reason he did was because I was too stubborn to let him be put on steroids. I knew the impact steroids would have on his adrenal glands. So we started him on good supplementation. It got a little bit better, but never really went away. Started him on good essential fatty acids, got a little bit better, but never really went away. And it wasn't until I sat down with two naturopathic friends of mine, and they talked about his condition specifically, and the line of questioning was something like, has he ever been on antibiotics? And I shared my story. I told them what I had done, and they said, you know, you've only done about half the job, because lactobacillus is only one simple strain. Lactobacillus acidophilus is only one simple strain of probiotic or good healthy gut bacteria. We need other strains as well. So this child had been pretty much dairy-free because he was lactose intolerant, and he had been pretty much wheat-free. I did not understand the impact of gluten at the time, but I did know that if he ate wheat, it irritated it. So now at the age of 10, I sit him down and I said, okay, so no dairy, no wheat. And he looks at me and it's like, okay, and what am I going to eat? I said, you know what, we're going to try this for a couple of weeks. If at the end of 2 weeks we haven't seen marked improvement, then we'll continue to look for the answer. And the way I tell the story is we put him on probiotics, a probiotic supplement. And as God is my witness, within 3 days, the eczema he had lived with for 8 years was so much improved I could not believe it. And within 5 days, the eczema he had suffered with for 8 years was gone, literally gone. That's what drove my understanding of the impact of a healthy gut on the skin. And if it can impact the skin that dramatically and that quickly, what else can it impact?
Good point.
And that's when I started my devotion to good gut health.
Well, you know what really made me sit up and pay attention, Dr. Conaway, because David Warren, you know, I take a lot of supplements, but I was still having issues. And when I heard this message that you talk about, that an unhealthy gut really affects absorption of even the best of supplements, then I thought, there's something in this that I need to know and the rest of our listenership needs to know. Address that if you would.
Well, it's fascinating because when we talk about bacteria in the gut, for a long time people felt like we shouldn't have any bacteria in our gut, and that is so not true. And as research continues, we're learning more and more all the time. But what we do know is if you have lots of good healthy gut bacteria, those healthy bacteria help to process your foods, help to break down and process your foods into those molecular structures that go off and do the jobs at the cellular level. They rebuild your muscle and they repair damaged tissue and they do all of those things. However, if your digestive system is full of unhealthy bacteria, what we're now learning is those unhealthy bacteria actually process those same foods in a much different way. And now what leaves the digestive system, instead of being those good healthy molecules, what now leaves the digestive system would be toxins and poisons and things that impact the system overall, things that create a chronic inflammatory reaction throughout the system, things that impair vascular system health and reproductive system health and respiratory system health. Those are poisons and toxins. And they can take up residence any place in the body. They can take up residence in the joints and become an arthritis. They can take up residence in the thyroid and become a Hashimoto's thyroiditis. They can take up residence in the brain and cause cognitive issues, Alzheimer's disease, things like that. The gut-brain connection is a very, very interesting field of study.
Dr. Conaway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's just unhealthy bacteria processing our foods in a different way.
All right. Well, I'm seeing more and more commercials on television about probiotics and yummy yogurt and things like that. Is that the probiotics you're talking about?
Well, yes, they are the same probiotics. However, you're not going to get the benefit from a yogurt that you might anticipate, and you're certainly not going to get the benefit that they promote on these TV commercials. And why do I say that? Well, So many of the yogurts that are out there are, again, filled with those fillers, those things that make them rich and creamy. That is not normal, okay? So the unfortunate thing is you're already eating something that is not whole food, that is not necessarily healthy food. But more than that, so many of them have sweeteners in them, and those sweeteners are not healthy. Many of them are still sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. And, grocery manufacturers have learned that we don't want to see high fructose corn syrup on the label. So now we have to be careful because they disguise it in different ways. It may be corn sugar, it may be liquid sugar, it could be various different descriptors. They all mean the same thing. It's that high fructose corn syrup, which is terribly harmful to the entire system. And if we have time, we'll talk about that. But that high fructose corn syrup as a sweetener or any other sweetener in yogurt is going to kill off most of that healthy bacteria that may have started out in that yogurt. So by the time you get it, because sugar has such an impact on healthy bacteria, it's not that beneficial. It's not that healthful for you. And I find it fascinating when I watch these commercials and they say, take the 7-day whatever brand challenge, and it's going to change your life. It's going to correct your issues. In my opinion, that is so not true. It may help in some way, but in order to correct the balance, in order to take an unhealthy digestive system and help to make it a healthy digestive system, you need to flood the system with probiotics.
And you're talking about a multiple strain probiotic, correct?
Correct. Multiple strains, because there are so many different strains. And if you take a multiple strain probiotic and you take large amounts for a period of time, what you're going to do is you're going to start or restart those healthy colonies, and they will then begin to multiply. And one of the things that happens is as those healthy bacteria begin to multiply, they drive out the unhealthy bacteria. Now, if you're lucky enough to be able to take good probiotics in addition to a product that is designed to get rid of some of the bad bacteria, then that's golden. You're going to see dramatic differences in a very short period of time. And, this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this message, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping people understand, fix the gut, fix the digestive system, because if your gut is healthy, again, you're going to process foods differently. Mm-hmm. All those supplements that you take are going to be better absorbed and processed differently, because now what's driving the process is the good, healthy bacteria and not the unhealthy bacteria.
All right. So much to talk about today on the program. I'm going to skip some of this information, and Dr. Conaway, we're going to have you back for part 2 of the Roadshow. But let's talk a little bit about Chapter 6 of your book, Why is America So Sick? And the chapter title is The Large Intestine. A clean colon is a healthy colon. How do we clean out our colons?
Well, there are various different ways. You don't all need to run out and get some kind of a kit to clean out the colon. What you need to recognize and understand is various different things that we can do on a daily basis help to keep things moving through the colon. Now, I personally am a proponent of water. Some people think that water's not necessary. There are even people who have degrees that say water is not as necessary as we make believe that it is. Now, I don't believe that's true. I've worked in the hospital setting for nearly 40 years, and the people that I took care of that were the most unhealthy were the people who were the most dehydrated, and they were dehydrated because they didn't drink enough water. Water is a really important part of keeping things moving through the system, through the kidneys, and through the colon. So I normally say, as a rule of thumb, what we want to do is take our total body weight in pounds, divide by 2, and that's the number of ounces of water you should consume every day. Now, that's water. That's not the coffee, tea, beer, wine, milk, anything else that you might be drinking. That's just water, in addition to the other things that you might be drinking. But the other thing that people don't seem to recognize is the impact of just a small amount of physical activity on a good, healthy colon. And what do I mean by that? Well, many people now especially sit all day in front of a computer. So they get up in the morning and they quickly get to their job. They sit in front of a computer all day long. They do not walk. They do not have any type of physical activity to speak of. And they go home in the evening. They sit down in front of the TV. The next day they get up and the vicious cycle repeats itself over and over again. If you don't have some type of cardiovascular stimulation, you slow down the motility in the gut. And how does that happen? Well, the cardiovascular system is comprised of a heart and vessels, and the heart is the pump, and it keeps the blood moving through those vessels. But we also have a lymphatic system, and that lymphatic system depends on the cardiovascular system for its flow. And it's flow through the lymphatic system that stimulates the peristaltic wave through the colon to move things out of the colon. So if you don't have any exercise, if you don't participate in any exercise, if you don't drink lots of water, if you don't eat food with fiber, and I don't mean all those breads and all of those fibers, because what we know is all of those breads and grains, although they have fiber, they have an enormous amount of sugar that the body doesn't need. But I'm talking about fibers that you find in leafy green vegetables, for example. Those are the kinds of fibers that help to add bulk and help to keep things moving through the colon. There are various different ways you can prepare kale, lettuce, all different kinds of lettuce that are out there these days. And these things are going to provide the healthy fibers that the body needs to help to keep things moving through. So I think that its key factors are lots of good liquid, making sure that you're taking lots of water in that liquid, making sure you're taking foods that have fiber, and making sure that you're getting some type of cardiovascular stimulation, which is going to, in turn, stimulate the lymphatic system and keep things moving through. The other thing, you need to stop and take time to have a bowel movement. It's so interesting to me because people in our fast-paced society don't take the time to do that. And they'll get up in the morning, they quickly shower, go downstairs, eat the standard American diet for breakfast, quickly get in the car, drive off to work, sit at a desk all day. Then they pick up the kids from school and take them to ballet, tap, soccer, football, whatever, and then bring them home, feed them the standard American diet, and put them to bed. And then by that time, you sit down to relax. You don't have the urge to have a bowel movement. And the next day, people get up and the same vicious cycle repeats over and over and over again. And all the while, you're not taking the time to relax and have a bowel movement, and therefore all this putrefied toxic waste is building up. That is one of the key problems, I think. People just don't take the time to go. And, so oftentimes, and I tease about it, and I believe I've even talked about it in my book, so oftentimes people, especially if they work in a public office building situation, they don't want to have a bowel movement in a public facility. So they don't go to the bathroom all day long. And then by evening time, they don't have the urge. Now, I say that there's a significant problem or issue with that because you're not getting rid of the bad stuff. It's certainly better out than in, if you will. And moving it through in a timely fashion is so critically important. When we have bowel movements, and this is another really important thing to understand, when we have a bowel movement, we sit on a commode. We sit on a throne, if you will. And it's fascinating because not every place in the world has a toilet like we have. I know that when I traveled to Turkey, I was very surprised, and the public restroom facilities are called water closets. There's a big WC on the outside of the door, so you know that that's a public restroom facility. And the first thing you notice is when you open the door, there's no throne, there's no commode, there's a hole in the ground and a nice lid over the hole, but you stoop to have a bowel movement. Now, the reason why I even discuss this is because what we know now is anatomically that's the healthiest way to have a bowel movement. If you sit to have a bowel movement on a commode like we normally do, there's actually a band of muscle that contracts around the lower portion of the colon, not allowing the release of that putrefied toxic waste. If you stoop, you relax that band of muscle and can more anatomically correctly have a bowel movement. So we know this now to be true, and there's even a company that has designed what they call the squatty potty. The squatty potty is a stool that fits around the base of your commode. When you sit down to have a bowel movement, you put your feet up on this stool and bring your knees up above the level of your waist and release that muscle. Now, you don't necessarily have to go by a squatty potty, and like I tell people, this is anatomically the healthiest way to have a bowel movement. Short of telling you to go rip your toilet out of the floor, just go to a hardware store and get a stool.
Mm-hmm.
A stool that's going to, again, pick your knees up above the level of your waist so that when you sit down to relax and have a bowel movement, you can have a more effective bowel movement and get that putrefied toxic waste out.
And I've heard you say before, Dr. Conaway, that food should not stay in the body for longer than 24 hours.
That's right. Transit time from the mouth to the toilet should be 24 hours or less.
That's a healthy gut, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Dr. Joanne Conaway is my guest today. I'm David Warren, and all this information she's talking about is included in her book, Why is America So Sick? And the book is available through her website, drjconaway.com, and that's the letters DRJ Conaway, CONAWAY.com. Well, something that I learned after reading this book is that if anyone suffers from something ending in itis, such as arthritis, diverticulitis, sinusitis, well, then that person has inflammation in their body, which causes these autoimmune disorders and diseases. When we come back, I want to talk with Dr. Conaway about reducing inflammation in our bodies. We'll both be back after this.
The Road Show is a listener favorite, which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Road Show also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup, and contact information and links to our Roadshow sponsors and its hosts. So join us for the Roadshow, whether on your radio or on your computer at oasisnetwork.org.
Reading from the back of the book by today's guest, Dr. Joanne Conaway. The name of the book is Why is America So Sick? Well, Dr. Conaway is an internationally recognized speaker and radio show host, and she's been helping people the world over improve their health for many years. She concisely pinpoints why Americans, and indeed people in many countries, are becoming ever more sick and not knowing why. Dr. Conaway explores the very heart of many sources of our health concerns and how changing our habits can turn our health around. Again, this book is available through her website, drjconaway.com, spelled drjconaway.com. Well, before the break, I said that after reading the book, I learned that if someone suffers from anything ending in itis, arthritis, diverticulitis, sinusitis, the list goes on, then that means that there's inflammation in the body, which causes these autoimmune disorders and diseases when the body basically turns on itself. Dr. Conaway, tell us the link between digestive health that we've been talking about and autoimmunity.
Well, it's fascinating. The link is very simply leaky gut. When we talk about leaky gut, what does that mean? Well, when we talked a few minutes ago about how our bacteria processes our foods and then our foods leave the digestive system either as healthy molecules or as toxins or poisons, that digestive system is comprised of a membrane that is one cell thick, which isn't very thick, okay? So one cell thick. And in the digestive system, imagine, if you will, that it's like a screen. And this is an easy way for people to understand what's happening as these molecules leave the digestive system. They leave through a very tightly woven structure. Now, if you have an overgrowth of unhealthy bacteria, if you have an overgrowth of a yeast, for example, that is going to impact and impair the function and the viability of that screen. And what's going to happen is you're going to put big holes in that screen. So now that tightly woven screen that would allow only those very small molecules of food to leave the digestive system is broken down. And it's just like if you have a screen on your door, you know that only the tiniest little bugs can get through that screen. But if that screen has holes in it, the big bugs always find the holes. Mm-hmm. Well, the similar thing happens in the gastrointestinal system. And because of, again, an unhealthy diet, that imbalance or impact of the unhealthy diet, the pharmaceuticals, any of those things that are going to impact that bacterial balance, you start to have an inflammation inside the digestive lining, and you have a weakening of these tight junctions, and you have an opening of these holes, making them much larger holes. Now, the problem happens when larger than normal food molecules, bad bacteria, fungal yeast, all of these things now leave the digestive system through these larger than normal holes. When you think about the digestive system, it is literally the doorway from the outside world to our inside world. And so we want to be able to keep things out of the system that don't belong there. Mm-hmm. If you have a breakdown in the integrity of the wall of the lining, now what happens is, again, these unhealthy food molecules leave. They're either too big or they're poisons or toxins, and as they leave the system and go out into the circulation, there is an immune trigger, and what happens is the body recognizes these things as foreign bodies. This is not normal. This should not be here. It's a foreign body, so the immune system mounts an attack. And that attack can become a violent attack. It can initiate as perhaps an allergic type reaction. When we talk about allergic type reactions, oftentimes people will start having these issues and problems by developing food sensitivities. All of a sudden, after eating strawberries all their lives, they can't eat strawberries anymore. They have a reaction to eating strawberries. Or chocolate. Many people have a reaction to chocolate. We know that many people have a reaction to peanuts. And peanuts are not good for a lot of different reasons, but people are reacting to these foods. They never reacted to them before. Now they're reacting to them. Or, even worse than that, we can have a situation like one I mentioned a few minutes ago, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is considered an autoimmune condition. The body is attacking itself. Now, conventional medicine says if you have an autoimmune condition, we need to quiet down or suppress your immune system. We don't want your immune system overreacting or functioning in hyperdrive, if you will. So we're going to suppress immune system function. Now, the problem with that is if you start on an immunosuppressant drug and start to suppress the body's immune function, then your immunity to anything is impaired.
Of course.
You're not going to have a healthy response. So this is the way conventional medicine handles it. From my perspective, what we need to do is we need to stop the problem that is causing the symptoms. Don't just treat the symptoms, but stop the problem. And stopping the problem is going to mean repairing the inside lining of the digestive system. And you do that by ensuring that you're eating good, healthy foods that are whole foods, that are not loaded with gluten and all those genetically modified components. And you're also needing to make sure that you've got lots of good, healthy probiotics, taking lots of good digestive enzymes, doing the things that will help to repair the inside lining of the digestive system. And it doesn't take very long. Remember, I said that membrane is one cell thick. If we can correct the problem, we can correct the health of that one cell thick membrane very, very quickly.
How long does it take to go from an unhealthy gut to a healthy gut?
Well, it depends on how unhealthy the gut is. But I have had people, many, many people, I will put them on what I call my 20-day program. And my 20-day program is a program where you literally flood the system with good probiotics and digestive enzymes for 20 days. Most people will come back to me after the first 7 to 10 days and say, oh my gosh, what have you done to me? I have not felt this well in years.
So you said flood the gut with probiotics, a multi-strain probiotic, and also digestive enzymes. Where do you get digestive enzymes?
Digestive enzymes, you can get enzymes in the foods that you eat as long as they're healthy, whole foods. meaning fresh fruits and vegetables, for example. If you want to take an enzyme product, there are various different good, healthy enzyme products out there, but you want to make sure that any enzyme product you're taking has a good protease to help to break down proteins, a good amylase to help to break down carbohydrates, a good lipase to help to break down your fats, cellulase to help to break down the cellulose. Those kinds of things are good products that are going to help the body to get the best benefit from the foods that you're eating, because in the human body, the role of the pancreas is to produce enzymes that help to break down the foods that we eat. Unfortunately for us, so much of what we eat is not foods that can be adequately broken down by the pancreas. And so in the human body, our pancreas suffers greatly. We know that, for example, the human pancreas is about twice the size it was 100 years ago. And
Really?
why is that? That's right. And that's because it is so overworked. And why is it so overworked? It's so overworked because it's constantly trying to break down foods that are not foods. It's constantly having to break down all our foods. And what do I mean by that? Well, so many people never eat raw fruits and vegetables. So many people can go through a day and never eat anything that is whole, raw food. So you never help or assist the pancreas by delivering to the body good enzymes that might be found in your food. Furthermore, the other really important problem that people have a tendency to not be aware of is the fact that as you graze all day long, if you're someone who is constantly munching on something, you're constantly calling on the pancreas to produce enzymes. So the pancreas is overworked. And if you take a digestive enzyme supplement as you begin to eat a meal, what you do is you actually help to support the function of the pancreas. It's just like when you eat a big salad before you eat a meal. When you eat a big salad, you're getting a lot of good, healthy enzymes delivered to the system just as you begin to eat your steak, for example, or your piece of baked chicken, in which case there would be no live enzymes in that food, but you've already helped to support the function of the pancreas by giving your body healthy enzymes in the foods that you're taking in. But if you, in addition to that, supplement with a good digestive enzyme supplement, you're going to help your body that much further be able to adequately break down those foods into those tiny molecular structures that I talked about earlier that are necessary to cross that membrane and go off and do the jobs at the cellular level.
Okay, so let's recap. I'm going to do this off the top of my head. For the digestion, start with a fresh, healthy salad with lots of raw vegetables in it, correct?
That would be good.
Okay.
And no dressing.
Oh, all right. And
okay.
For the digestive enzyme that you can get at the store, I'm thinking of like a health food store, it should have a lot of the words that end in ASE on it or in
right.
it. Okay. And then for the wide-spectrum probiotic or the multi-strain probiotic, it should have Lactobacillus, Acidophilus, and Bifidobacterium at least.
At least. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Dr. Joanne Conaway is our special guest today. We'll have some closing thoughts from her after this final break. Before we do go to break, here is her website where you can pick up this book, Why is America So Sick? The web address is drjconaway.com, spelled drjconaway.com. I'm David Warren, your host, and Dr. Conaway and I will both be back after this. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. Well, it has been enlightening today to have back with us once again Dr. Joanne Conaway talking about important information, specifically linking digestive health to immunity issues. This information is included in her book, Why is America So Sick? And I'll give you the ordering address, her website, before we say goodbye. But you were a nurse for many, many years, Dr. Conaway, and you saw many patients basically give their doctors their lives and full control of their lives. And so what is your message about all this?
Well, you are so right, David, and it's because of the way we've been grown up to believe we should take care of ourselves. You go to the doctor, he checks you over, he does lab work, he makes a determination based on your lab work, and you're either going to walk out of there with a clean bill of health or you're going to walk out of there with a pharmaceutical. The unfortunate thing is these doctors in today's world have very few minutes to talk to you. And in fact, most of them don't talk to you. Most of them look at your lab work and write a prescription if that's what's necessary. They don't sit down and talk to you. And I have been a nurse, like I said, for 40 years. I can remember working with doctors way back when, where the doctor had the opportunity to sit down and to talk to a person, and that's how they found out what was wrong with the person. Now, they don't even see the person before they get lab work back, or they get an x-ray back, or they get something to determine what's wrong with that person. Now, the sad reality is we are in control, or should be in control, of our bodies. We know our bodies better than any doctor knows our bodies. And the misconception is the doctor knows so much more about me because he has my lab work and he knows what that means. That is what is driving the medical profession today. When I talk to people, the most important thing that I want people to take away from my conversation is you are in control. It is your body, and you can make the decisions about whether or not you want to keep your body healthy. And by that I mean, are you someone who makes the decision, either consciously or not, that you're going to eat prepackaged processed foods? If you make that decision, then you need to make sure that you understand the potential consequences of doing that. I know that many people don't know those consequences and don't understand those consequences, and that's why I am so empowered to educate people and to help them understand about the food supply. Because if you pay attention to what's on television, you would think that anything that comes in a package or a box that looks and tastes good is healthy for you, and that is so not true. And we have a horrible problem with obesity, and especially childhood obesity. It's because parents are feeding these children foods that are unhealthy, but not knowingly and not understanding what's in these foods. Education is power, and you take education and put it to good use, and you can do amazing things. But you must be the person who makes the decision to do that, and that's the reason why I say you're in control. You need to learn about these things. And, unfortunately, if you don't have a basic understanding that they're not healthy and could potentially be harmful, then you will go on just eating those unhealthy foods. But what I try to do is help people understand that there is another side to the story. The other side is not necessarily a pleasant story, but it's one that once you know and understand, you can take that information and make dramatic changes in your life.
It's something we can do something about.
Absolutely.
And you say clean up that gut, clean up that gut. Now, is all this information about cleaning up our guts in your book, Why is America So Sick?
A lot of that information is in the book. As far as the 20-day program that I reference, that is not in the book. That's something that the information for that program can be obtained by visiting my website, and I can help people get the information that they need in terms of how I recommend probiotics and enzymes be taken.
And what is that website address, Dr. Conaway?
It's drjconaway.com.
drjconaway.com. drjconaway.com. Thank you, Dr. Joanne Conaway, for joining us once again on The Road Show.
Well, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure.
Come back and see us. For Dr. Joanne Conaway, I'm David Warren, and it's been another great Road Show. You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.